back to another episode of Debt Nation, where we are busy putting death out of business. And great episode here. Got Dave Lee on the phone for you for a quick China update. But before we get into Dave Lee, let's first thank our sponsor, Thrivous. You know the deal. You share the link around. That goes from $5 all the way up to $160 worth of Thrivous. That's a great deal. Also, thanks to David Kelly over there. I Am Transhuman, doing a fantastic job, David Kelly. Now, over to Dave Lee. Dave Lee, so much news has been happening in China. I know you were trying to retire and get out of the game. You can't get out of the game, Dave. It's China. How are you, Dave?
Yeah, well, this is going to continue to affect Australia for the long term, obviously. I guess the rest of the world has now woken up that China is not only a threat geopolitically, but they are a threat in every aspect of life, really. It's good. The world's woken up. This is great news. Well, for the time being, anyway.
Yeah, you've been right on a lot of these, talking points, Dave, across over the years. A lot of people weren't awake to some of the issues. My issues are not, and I just be clear with this, are not with the Chinese people themselves. It's always been with the regime. I don't have any feelings or animosity towards, say, Taiwan. I think Taiwan is a very, functions as a great country, a great democracy. They try to implement human rights. Taiwan is a good country. It's always been, my issue's always been with the CCP. How about you?
Oh, yes, of course. That is what I've been talking about from the very beginning. When Australia announced the travel ban from China, the CCP came out and scorched us in the media. They had to go at everybody, really, but the travel ban wasn't on Taiwan for obvious reasons.
Yeah, Taiwan has done a very good job. They remember SARS. They remember the SARS outbreak, and they've done a very good job at curbing the virus. Let's talk about the virus. So there was a virus that started in Wuhan, and it spun out of control. Do you want to just quickly talk about that? What do you think that the CCP handled the virus outbreak well?
I guess to start with, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor either. So all I am is repeating what I have, I guess, read in the media. What is secondhand information? I guess everyone, to some extent, has a good idea of what has happened. The CCP has come out and blamed America for this virus. They say that it was planted there by America, and then recently Donald Trump came out and called it the Chinese virus. I tend to agree that we should rename it the Chinese virus, just so that we remember where it actually came from. The CCP has controlled the narrative quite well around the world, and I believe that they have won the proper propaganda campaign. Countries all around the world are praising China for their reaction, even though in February they were scolding the foreign countries that put a travel ban on China in February, even though we've tracked it back to patient zero was back in November, mid-November. So obviously their how they reacted wasn't very professional. They also had a doctor that came out and called it SARS and said that we have a bit of an issue. This doctor was arrested and he died in jail. I think we can all agree that the CCP didn't handle it too well, and now the world economy is collapsing. I would love an auditor to come in here and calculate how much money China has made the world over the last, I think, 13 years. China has been pushing global growth. And now I would like those people to come in and calculate the damage that China has done to the global economy and the opportunity costs that they are costing the world. Not to mention the deaths that are going to that are currently happening and going to continue to grow throughout the near to long term future. I think we need to have an objective view of China and this country that we deal with.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there. And speaking about the outbreak, one of the most notable organizations to swoop in and praise the CCP was the World Health Organization. Do you have anything to say on that? They were very commendable about their response, their authoritarian response. And as you mentioned, it started back in November, and they started locking up people, and they fired people and called them dissidents and stuff. That's not a free and open and transparent society. And that's not how you deal with a virus. You deal with a virus by openness, transparency, by coordinating with other nations, by coordinating with your people and having open access and free information flows. They did everything the wrong way, and they always do everything the wrong way. In that way, that's the nature of authoritarianism. What do you say?
Very good point. Yes, I couldn't agree more. The way this is seemingly playing out, which I tend to agree would be the way China does something that negatively affects people. They show a pattern of behavior, and if anyone says anything publicly or takes action to protect themselves against this authoritarian regime, they are punished for protecting themselves. I guess now we understand the pattern, and unless people have been living under a rock, I think everybody has woken up now, which is great. Let's move into the future. So the future, I've already mapped this out for many years, will be, say, China invades a country. Okay, they invade a country that refuses to trade with them, and they want to open up these markets. So they invade the country, and then the country that is on the border of the country that China has invaded starts to build up their military to protect themselves. Well, common sense, right? That's what you do. This is when China will publicly condemn this country for trying to protect themselves and then eventually invade them again. This is the pattern of behavior of the CCP, is that you cannot protect yourself against them. They will publicly come out and just put this propaganda campaign against you. And it's a very dangerous regime that we're dealing with. I think everyone's woken up to that now, but their pattern of behavior is quite clear. They do something, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's not the people, it's the CCP. And, the people within the CCP construct, within China, are themselves slaves to the CCP. They're disenfranchised as well. They're not empowered. They're treated horribly by the CCP. Do you agree with that? It's not a big conspiracy. It's a political party.
It's not a conspiracy at all. I think everyone's woken up to it. I think also we need to take into account that when America would go to war, they would become a dictatorship themselves, and then they would switch back to a democracy. Sometimes you need this. This country is vying to control the world. This is the plan, and the Chinese Communist Party is the leader of this. And I think we need to be totally honest with your viewers that part of the problem is that if China wins, this Chinese Communist Party wins and dominates the world, the people who benefit from that will then praise the CCP. I think we need to take that into account, is that if the CCP fails, the Chinese people will realize that they were backing an evil regime, and they will understand that the West is the best. But if the CCP wins, then the Chinese people, who will continue to get rich and control the world, will then praise the CCP. So This is the West or the world versus the CCP, and whoever wins, the Chinese people will back. That's just how it's been playing out. And I think we need to go into this with our eyes wide open. And Australia's flooded with CCP spies, CCP people who are sleeper cells. There's Chinese money that owns some assets in Australia that are very dangerous for the Australian people. There's Chinese companies in Australia that refuse to hire you based on the color of your skin. There's also we've been flooded with elderly Chinese who are sitting on welfare and exploiting our Medicare system. I think that when our economy starts to collapse because of the actions of the CCP and China, we also need to take into account that domestically we need to cut the fat. And if you speak to any immigrant who has permanent residency or citizenship in Australia today, and you ask them what happens if Australia's economy collapses, will you hang around? You've got a PhD, would you hang around and help us? The answer is 100% no. If you have a PhD and you're a foreigner in this country, even if you have citizenship, you will go to where the best options are, and that will be to leave Australia. And that's when the avalanche really hits our domestic economy, is when all of those educated people that came here for those powerful Australian dollars realize that powerful Australian dollar is now worthless, and they go off into the free market and take advantage of powerful currencies elsewhere. I think we need to take into account that it's far more complex than that. Just that. There's a lot going on. Right now there's a lot of people on visas and student visas right now that are currently unemployed and unable to pay rent. This is going to have flow-on effects throughout our domestic economy as well. People will be less likely to want to come to Australia. The currency has collapsed. It is shocking what has happened to the Australian currency. And if you compare the Australian currency to almost any other currency, we've dropped against it. There's a possibility that Indonesia has just overtaken our economy. Indonesia, when all the dust settles, where will all the dust settle? And there's a possibility Indonesia is now the regional power, because we used to be the regional power. Australia used to control this, the South Asia, and Indonesia used to just do what we told them to do, same as New Zealand. I believe that may no longer be the case. We may have to do what Indonesia tells us into the future. I also believe that China has won. When China comes back online, they will be the factory of the world. People, when they look at money, they're starting to think, where should I put my money? Should I put it in the stocks? Well, that's what it is. It's gambling. Should I chuck my money into gambling here, gambling there? Where should I just? People think that they can manifest money just by shuffling around the money and the wealth that they currently have. Real money is just a medium of exchange for goods or services. And if you have a look at China, China is producing the goods. Therefore, China is the richest country on earth. China has won. China is the richest country on earth, and they pull the strings. And you're seeing it in the media. You're seeing it play out with people disagreeing on even the smallest of things. I've been quite aware of this from day one, that I will be, one of the lone voices out there just saying, look, this is a huge threat, because most people will be happy to just kiss China's ass until the country totally collapses. There's a lot of baby boomers at the moment too, that if you speak to them, they're more likely to say, oh, look, as long as the economy holds up for the next 15, 20 years while I'm still alive, I'm okay with whatever happens to it. It shows little to no respect for the Anzacs and the hundreds of thousands of Australians that have fought for this country. You also need to take into account that human rights, they don't exist. We've been for a year and a half now just saying, let's just let in refugees and immigrants and give them free money, helicopter money to every immigrant that applies for a protection visa. People were flying into Australia and 77 people per day are applying for protection visas and then disappearing in Australia. These are people that are not here to help our economy. These are people that are just literally parasites on our domestic economy. It's time to have a serious discussion about what is happening to our domestic economy, because now people have woken up to what has happened to our economy. It's time to start cutting the fat and start. Instead of just paying for Qantas, just sending money to Qantas just to keep them afloat, I'll be. I don't know how red pill you want to go on this, but I can go all the way. And we're running out of time to do something about this. And drastic measures need to happen if we're going to protect our standard of living in this country. And I don't really think that our government is willing to make those changes. That means that we will be probably confined to this country with a weak economy, a weak currency. Those days of Australians being able to fly to third world countries and enjoy the high life, this is probably a time in history where we look back and we think, wow, this was the moment. This was the moment when Australia collapsed. And I remember Grandpa being able to fly to Indonesia and go to Bali, and it was only a couple dollars. Now I need to save up for an entire year just to go to Indonesia. And also another thing I'd like to talk about is sexual marketplace value. White Australian women used to control this country. I dare say that this is another turning point where Chinese women are now the most valuable women on planet Earth. It does matter because people have been talking about white privilege forever. Just like buying and selling stocks, it goes up and it goes down. This is also a turning point as well. I think it's complex. There's a lot of things moving at this moment in time. I guess I've covered quite a few. I've just kind of randomly went on a bit of a rant there.
Yeah, you've been on a bit of a rant there. But, I think you and I fundamentally disagree on the rise of China. I think this is the moment when China starts to crack geopolitically. I'm looking at Chinese Navy.
I hope you're right.
Well, I'm looking at the Navy, and they have a pathetic Navy. They've got 2 tin pot aircraft carriers. They have, they have a Navy that's the People's Liberation Navy is as capable of attacking Taiwan and Taiwan only. They can't get Japan. They could get North Korea quite easily and potentially South Korea, but of course that would bring in America, which is a whole nother ballgame, and Japan is a whole nother ballgame. The reason I'm not confident with the rise of China as the way you are is multiple reasons. There's geographic regions. The geography of China is it's mountains, it's desert, it's rainforest, it's complex. It's hard to navigate, and they can't expand into itself. It can't recover, especially from this virus. It's not expandable. It's not usable, unlike the United States, which is very usable in the fact that even the deserts are protective barriers, whereas the deserts inside of China are not protective barriers from anything, because the stans, those little states out there, are not a threat to China. So therefore, it's a barrier. The Himalayas is the only protective force. They don't have a blue water navy. So as America starts to withdraw from the Middle East because of its oil independence, and let's see what America does with shale. I think Trump has to bail the shale industry out in America to maintain American independence. Plus, right now, he's filling up the strategic reserve, the strategic oil reserve, and they're building more of them, doubling, tripling down on the oil thing. And once America leaves the Middle East, how is China ever going to protect its own oil supplies? So that's energy gone down. Calories. It's got 1.3 billion people, and as it can't protect its supplies, it's food and it's input dependent. Unlike Japan, which has a deep blue navy, and it can guard its calorie intake and its energy intake. I just saw Japan launch 2 big new blue water navy ships, that are capable of reaching the Middle East. So it's Chinese calories, the amount of import cannot sustain 1.3 billion people, even with a declining demographic. And their financial system is a wreck. Their financial system, it's the biggest debt bubble in human history. And their financial system just will not stand up to it. And with a slowdown like this, I think we're starting to. They just pricked their own pin, their debt pin here.
I hope you're right.
I don't see a path forward for China. I see China backed into a corner. I mean, I know you disagree. So so is there anything wrong with anything I said there?
I am extremely pro-America, which I don't really hide. I would like Australia to double down, triple down, quadruple down on
Can I just add a point here? That's a really good point, because I'm thinking of maybe assisting in founding two political parties in this country that we need right now. And I love your information, your input on this. One, CANZUK, the Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, Canada, UK agreement where we would share military resources and all of that. That's a whole nother discussion. But an Australian-US friendship political party, what do you think? A one-issue party.
That does, you know what that does? That really does cut through all of the smoke and mirrors that is a very good idea. As I don't hide, I am very pro Australia American alliance, and just quadrupling down on this alliance like we have never done before, because we need it more than anything.
Yep.
We would not be here without the United States, and I do have these discussions with a lot of Australians, and some Australians, well, I dare say a lot of Australians don't agree with me, but there are a few like you, and there are a few that do agree that America has been a force for good, especially for Australia, and some people just don't get that. But yeah, that's a great idea. I would vote for them. You've got my vote. 100%.
A single issue party, and it's the Australian-US friendship party. That's all it's about. It's about strengthening bonds and ties between us and Americans, because we love America. Okay, I'm a big American fan, the Big Apple, whatever. I'm all gung-ho USA, you know what I mean?
I think also America needs to understand that we are pro-America as well.
Yes.
Because we've got so many people who are pro-China and anti-democracy, and
it sends out the wrong message. It sends out this mixed message, especially, you're right. There's too many protests which send out mixed messages.
Exactly, and I think Americans need to understand that, I think we need to sort out ourselves, and that's what we need. When we allow immigrants in from countries that hate America, they come here and they spread these awful theories about America and conspiracy theories, and it's bad for this country. We need to understand why we are rich and safe in the first place, and that is solely America. It's not because we did it. It's because America was the maritime power for such a long time, and they protected us, and we did whatever we could to help them out. And when we allow people in from countries as refugees, and every day we have about 80 people arriving from these countries, because I spoke to someone in the immigration department, and I was like, what the hell's going on? And he told me that 80 people per day, they just come here for a holiday, and then they apply for a protection visa, then they get to stay here, and they're here for 2 years, and they're from countries that hate America. We need to stop that, because especially right now, we need America more than anything, but then ever before as well.
I'm totally with you on that. I mean, we may disagree on this or that, but the disagreements are minor and insignificant in the fact that we both and the whole country really advocates for a great friendship and a continued alliance with the United States. It's absolutely necessary and vital.
And make it clear, make it very transparently clear that if you're in Australia and you are anti-American, get the fuck out. I have to just say that straight up, get out. Because go back to wherever, if you don't like America and you don't like this alliance, that means that you don't like the political system that we have here, you don't like democracy, you don't like our freedoms, you don't like everything that this country was built on. It's very important. But yeah, I don't think with China's rise we actually disagree. What it is that what we both are looking at the information that we have at hand, and we're both drawing two different conclusions. It's like watching a football game. You like the forwards of one team, and you think that their forwards are going to dominate, and I think the backs on the other team and their defense is going to win the game. We just think that two different. I pick one team, you pick the other team. It's not really a disagreement. It's just that.
Yeah. We're looking at it from different perspectives. And the other thing is the other part of the scenario that I didn't even bother to mention. I forgot. Russia is in the middle of a big collapse, and with this coronavirus. They're a very old population, and that country is going down the tube. And, it's Russia and China allied at the hip, which means China will take on the burden of supporting Russia now. So it's not Russia goes from being a beneficiary of it goes from being beneficial to the alliance to a beneficiary of the alliance as China steps in to bail out Russia from all the hell that's coming to Russia. Russia is not the Soviet Union; it's a tin pot country now.
Apparently Saudi Arabia and Russia are in the middle of an oil dispute. They're pumping oil out. That's why the price of petrol at the pump has collapsed, and I've never seen that in my entire life.
It's unfortunate for people at the Bowser that that the Australian dollar collapsed so much. Otherwise, the prices would be down near 180 or something like that, or 170. I mean, it would have been amazing. But because the dollar rushed down in a collapse mode, it forced the price up on that currency. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's still down a long way off those highs of 170, 180.
And also America has, in January, before all of this virus came out and started affecting the economy, America came out and changed the laws where it comes to crude oil coming out of the Middle East. They changed it from, I think it was 20% sulfur down to 10% sulfur. And the only way that you can reduce the sulfur content in the crude oil coming out of the Middle East is to add sweet crude, and Australia pretty much has a monopoly on sweet crude. So this is another example of America pulling the strings to try and help us out, and it just makes me a little bit disappointed that most Australians don't really see the value of America. That's one thing that we both agree on, is that we're watching a football team. We both want the same team to win. I just think that our enemy is doing really well as well.
I want democracy. I want freedom of expression. I want civil order. I want human rights. I want values, that span across the good spectrum of society to win and come out on top. I mean, and I agree with you fully in that fight, sir. I do not want to see authoritarianism and this sort of this Xi Jinping controlled system to descend on us. Your predictions of a slow decline are horrifying, and I do not want to see that. I think life is worth living. It's not worth living in that way.
But also,
all right, well, we've run out of time there, okay. Dave. Hey, is there anything else you wanted to say before we go?
I guess we covered a few things sort of quick, but yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah. That's good. Well, we don't have much time. We've got to go. There's things to do, people to see. Not really. We're all sitting in isolation, aren't we? But I have to quickly thank our audience, and thank you, Dave, very much for this. This was an interesting perspective. Again, we don't agree on everything, but that's great. But I'll talk to you more about the political party. Brent Elman, thank you very much for contributing on Patreon. Dan Elton coming in there. Mr. Shoemaker. Frank Martone, we did a Star Wars episode with you. That was fantastic. Future of Humanity. The future is in your hands. Thanks very much there. Chairman Gennady Stolярov, John Carrots, Michael DeVerde, and David Shoemaker. Thanks, everybody, for contributing on Patreon as well to keep this show alive in this horrible time where, you know, I've lost my job, and so it's all on live support. So thank you guys all out there in the world, and and thank you, Dave, for coming on. Again, we don't agree on everything, but we do agree that, you know, justice and light and truth and freedom of speech and human rights and all that should prevail the day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, that's Debt Nation, where we're busy putting death out of business.